Our next reading is carrying on from Luke chapter 24, verses 13 to 35. That very day, two of them were going to a village named Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and they were talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing together, Jesus himself drew near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What is this conversation you are holding with each other as you walk?" And they stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, named Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened in these days?" And he said to them, "What things?" And they said to him, "Concerning Jesus of Nazareth, a man who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and rulers delivered him up to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things have happened. Moreover, some women of our company amazed us. They were at the tomb early in the morning, and when they did not find his body, they came back saying that they had even seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see." And he said to them, "O foolish ones, and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. So they drew near to the village to which they were going. He acted as if he were going further. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, for it is towards the evening, and the day is now far spent." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at table with them, he took the bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to them. And their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Did our hearts not burn within us while he talked to us on the road, while he opened to us the scriptures?" And they rose that same hour and returned to Jerusalem. And they found the 11 and those who were with them gathered together, saying, "The Lord is risen indeed, and has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he was known to them in the breaking of the bread.
Well, just 2 points for us today as we think about the resurrection of Jesus Christ on this Easter Sunday. First of all, Jesus rose from the dead. And then secondly, seek a burning heart. Jesus rose from the dead and seek a burning heart. First of all, Jesus rose from the dead. I just want to draw your attention to verses 13 to 14 in the text on the screen. I'm just going to read it out. It says this: "That very day, two of them were going to a village named Emmaus." This village exists. Karis and I were in Jerusalem about 11 years ago, and I'll never forget seeing the sign to Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking with each other about all the things that had happened. And then it feels a little bit freaky. It feels a little bit kind of, sort of, "Oh, who's that?" When you're kind of walking around London and then suddenly there's someone right next to you. Okay, because we just have a little look here, verse 15. "While they were talking and discussing together, Jesus himself drew near and went with them." You know that feeling, Karis and I sometimes have it, where you feel like someone sort of ears dropping into your conversation and you're like, "Okay, just go on and then we can talk." But this is a different figure. This is someone who's meant to be dead. And initially, the two men, they don't recognize Jesus, and Jesus gets into this chat with them, and he says, what are you talking about? Like as if he doesn't know what they're talking about. And they say, have you not heard about the thing that's really the news around town here in Jerusalem? This man, Jesus Christ, he lived, he died. And you know what? There's these women who are saying that his grave was empty, and they saw these angels, and actually he's risen from the dead. But notice, they're sad. But clearly, what the writer is intending to show us in these verses is that Jesus is risen from the dead. That he is alive. Now, just a small application for us as we think about this. There's a famous minister called D.L. Moody from the last century here. He was in the 1800s, and he was once asked, he was quite famous, I know it's probably difficult to imagine now, but he would speak to crowds and crowds of people. We had this guy called Sankey who would share great music, and then he would preach. And he was well known. And he was once asked, when he died, kind of, what would be put in the newspapers about him? And he said, there'll be maybe some newspaper article. I mean, he was a famous guy. People knew about him. And it will say that D.L. Moody has died. And he said, that will be the biggest lie ever told. Because on that day, I will be more alive than I've ever been. Not because of anything I've done, but because Jesus rose from the dead. That is the Christian claim, that because Jesus defeated death, those that trust him can also rise from the dead. That actually there is not just this world and then that's it. Now, if you're someone here who's an atheist materialist, what do I mean by that? Someone who believes that there isn't a God, that there's no supernatural. My experience is when you investigate the claims of the resurrection, you often have to do gymnastics to work out some of the facts of the resurrection. That actually it's more plausible just to believe that the resurrection happened. There's plenty of material we'd love to give you. Lee Strobel has written a great book, The Case for Christ, that talks through the resurrection. But there's a few other applications. Second one. Often the resurrection, and I would say more broadly the Gospels, there are little details that are within those accounts that it is kind of implausible why they're there if this was just a made-up story. Let me just give you a few examples. Okay, verse 18, let's look down with us. Then one of them named Cleopas. Why the heck is that included in there? And they don't mention the other person that is with Cleopas. We're just told about Cleopas. Indeed, there are many little details like that. If we turn to Mark's Gospel, I'll turn there, Mark 15 and verse 21. It says this, and they compelled a passerby. This is when Jesus was being, he was about to be crucified. And they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry the cross. Why include that? Yet that the person who was writing that account was wanting us to be able to find people and say, this actually happened. We go on. The women being the first witnesses of the resurrection. We hear that today in 21st century London. We think, well, there's no problem with that. That's great. As women. That was, you have to understand them. We just want to look down to verses 22 to 23. Moreover, some of the women of our company amazed us. They were at the tomb early in the morning, and when they did not find his body, they came back saying that they had even seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. In the first century, the testimony of a woman was not even credible in court. If you were trying to make up this fairy tale or a story, you would not put women as the eyewitnesses of the resurrection. It just wouldn't happen. What is the reason for this being included? That it did happen. Another detail as you just read through the wider account of the Gospels is the disciples. They are the early church leaders. They're the people that, surely if they were wanting to kind of invent this story and consolidate power, they'd make themselves out to be amazing. They'd make themselves out to be great. And as you read through the accounts, that's not the case. They're a disaster. Peter denies Jesus 3 times. It's a shambles. They're a ragtag bunch. And yet you see after this that they, in the book of Acts, are completely transformed. And their leadership changes the world. Jesus rose from the dead. That's the first point this passage makes. Secondly, seek a burning heart. Seek a burning heart. We see there in verse 17, it says this, and he said to them, "What is this conversation that you are holding with each other as you walk?" And they stood still, looking sad. Even though we know from later on in the story that they'd been told there was an empty tomb, and that there were angels that apparently appeared to these ladies and they had said that Jesus had risen, they're sad in their hearts. And this is confirmed also by verse 25 if you look on. And he said to them, "O foolish ones and slow of heart." Jesus described them as being slow of heart. But in this passage, there is a dramatic change that is available to all of us. If we have a look down to verse 32. And they said to each other, "Did not our hearts burn within us while he talked to us on the road, while he opened up the scriptures to us?" What sort of heart do you have? What sort of heart do you have? Is it slow and sad? Or is it burning? Like a fire? Now, the heart, according to the Bible, is not the way we view the heart in our culture. Our culture sort of views the heart as, it's like sort of our emotions. But the heart is, in the Bible, it's like it's the seat of our personality. It's who we are. It's who we are at our core, at our deepest core. And in this passage, we see that these two men go from having a heart that is sad, that is decrepit, that is just down, to a heart that is on fire, that is burning. How did they get that burning heart? Well, the most famous story of someone in church history maybe who went from having a sad and slow heart to a burning heart just happened literally maybe a mile down the road here in London. John Wesley was a fellow at Lincoln College in Oxford University. Before that, he was at Christ Church as an undergraduate. He was a very successful, religious man. And he was the type of guy who wanted to do the right thing. And he left all of that and he went over to Georgia and he was sharing the good news of Jesus Christ with people over there in the USA. And it was a disaster. Nothing worked out. And he came back, and it was in a little church in Aldersgate, just in London, just up the road, that he walked into a service with a slow and a heart that was sad. And as he walked into that service, he heard a commentary from the Epistle of Romans by Martin Luther, the person that really started the Reformation. And as he heard that, it was said that his heart was, and it was described as strangely warmed. That something changed. And far from that person who was over in America struggling and distraught, as you walk around this country and as you walk around the world, you will see many a Methodist church. And John Wesley was not just a great evangelist, someone who shared the message of Christ, but he also was a great church planter. And the beginnings of the Methodist church were through him and a guy called George Whitefield. He was someone who had a sad heart. He was someone who had a heart that was struggling, but his heart changed to a burning heart. a heart that was on fire. Now, just a few application points on this. What are the causes of our sad or slow heart? Well, let's look at what Jesus says in verse 25. If you just look down with me. And he said to them, "O foolish ones." Foolish ones. What does that word mean? As I did a word study on that this week. Inconsiderate, unintelligent, unwise. The way that this word is used in the Bible, it's someone who is not using their mind well. It's lazy thinking. Come to decisions based on feelings or, just following their emotions. Now, let's just think about this. When we think about Scripture, when we think about our mind, do we take it seriously? Do we take the renewing of our mind seriously? Because what we're seeing here is that Jesus is going after the fact that they're not using their minds well. Are we conformed? Do we just rubbish in, rubbish out? Do we actually just fill our minds with things of the culture? Or actually, as we engage with culture, do we use our minds to evaluate culture? What are the good things? What are the bad things? 1 Peter 1 verse 13, therefore preparing your minds for action. That actually our minds is like a watchtower and we are to be careful about what goes in and out and what we think about. I was just walking by a newspaper stand this morning and I just saw a number of the tabloid newspapers. Newspapers like The Sun and The Mirror. And I'm not criticizing, those particular papers and what they stand for or anything else. What I'm just factually trying to say is often, those newspapers bypass the mind and go straight for people's emotions in the way that they share news. But Jesus here gets to the heart by going to the mind, which then affects the emotions and our actions. What else does Jesus say about a sad heart? It's not just that we ought to be careful about our minds. Just verses 25 again. And he said to them, O foolish ones, and slow of heart. The problem is not just the mind, it's the heart. It's actually the seat of our desires and our, of deep down who we are. And actually there's a problem as human beings. Just want to illustrate this with our hearts. You ever find, on a day off where you get up in the morning, you have your breakfast, and you go to read the newspaper, and you are just alert. You are ready, and you are just diving into everything it says. And then you just pick up your Bible, and literally it's like this kind of daze passes over you, and you are just exhausted. You are yawning, you're tired, you're unengaged. Why? Well, the Bible would say that our dullness of heart is due to our sin, is due to the fall. Romans 1, 22 to 23, I'm just going to read it out. It just says this, and it's helpful in helping us to understand our hearts. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Now you see, our problem, our desire for sin, the fact that actually deep down, we like to stay at a surface level of actions, but deep down in our hearts, we often desire other things, what the Bible calls idols. We exchange God for other things, and that dulls our heart. Instead of seeking Christ, instead of seeking God, desiring Him above all things, making Him our first love. And that means there's a lethargy in our hearts. So we've seen why we can have slow hearts, why we can have sad hearts. Now, what's the effect of this? The effect of a slow heart or a sad heart is that it's a hindrance if you're a Christian. It's a hindrance on the spread of the message of Jesus. Because when people look at us, or when people get close to us and our lives, They do not reflect the glory of God. They do not reflect the magnificence of God. They do not reflect the wonder of God. Because we are loving and desiring other things. Our minds are foolishly pursuing other things. And often people in church today, they talk about the focus on the outsiders. If you want to reach outsiders, we need to think about how we can carefully have outsiders come in. And I do agree we need to do that. But more important is the insiders, the people who are here. That actually, if there are hearts that are changed, if there is a revival in our hearts, a revival in this church, we will not be short of people coming into church. Because people will see your lives. And as a result of your love for God, you will want to share with other people. You'll want to bring them in. It will be like a waterfall or a cup that's overflowing. It will overflow to others. So the question is, how can we have a burning heart? How can you have a burning heart? How can I have a burning heart? Verse 27. And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. Notice the word all. Why do you not believe all that the Lord has given us in the scriptures? If you see that these guys here on the Emmaus road, they had prejudices. We see it in verse 21. But we had hoped that he would be the one to redeem Israel. They thought that this Messiah was going to come. He was going to be a warrior. He was going to kick the Romans out and restore Israel. That's what they thought. That's what their lenses, had taught them to think. And they thought that the Messiah was not going to be a suffering servant. Just look down to verses 25 to 26. And he said to them, O foolish ones and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into glory? The stumbling block for them was the Messiah was a suffering servant. He was going to die. They were expecting some conquering king who was going to come in and he was going to, sort all their problems out. Not a Messiah who would die for the sins of the people. But you see, they were picking and choosing scriptures. Did they not read Genesis 3:15, where it was promised that there would be a seed of the woman that would crush the head of the serpent? Did they not read Isaiah 53, where we are told that the suffering servant, the Messiah, would die for the sins of the people? Psalm 22, where the Messiah would say, my God, why have you forsaken me? Foreshadowing the cross and what we celebrated on Good Friday. See, they were picking and choosing the scriptures. But then there's a change. We see it there in verses 32. Then they said to each other, after they had had all of the scriptures explained to them, did not our hearts burn within us while he talked to us on the road, while he opened up the scriptures? Why was there such a dramatic change? Why? From being sad, from being slow of heart, to having this fire, to having this burning. Yes, they had met the living God. Yes, Jesus himself had seen them, and that was an aspect of it. But it wasn't the most important aspect. How did they have a burning heart? Verse 32, might this just burn on our hearts? Did not our hearts burn within us while he talked to us on the road, while he opened up the scriptures? Verse 44, if we had it, I'll read it out. It says this: these are my words that I spoke to you while I was still with you, that everything written about me in the law and the prophets and Moses and the Psalms must be fulfilled. The whole of the Old Testament was pointing to Jesus, and they got the most incredible Bible study going. And that is why their hearts were burning. Now, friends, we have the privilege of having the scriptures in our own language in front of us. Some generations didn't have this. We have it right there. We have all these tools, all these commentaries available to us, that we might know Jesus more through the scriptures, that our hearts might burn as we are not conformed to culture, but we are conformed to Jesus, and that we can know him more. We also see the second aspect of how their hearts were burning. Just in verse 30. When he was at the table with them, he took the bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to them. They had communion. They remembered Christ's death. It wasn't just the scriptures, but it was the story of Jesus dying for them that they remembered when they broke the bread. And these two aspects gave them a burning heart. Friends, may the Lord have mercy on us to remember on this incredible day that Jesus has risen from the dead. But would we not just leave it at that? Would we not be a church which believes all the right things, but has sad and slow hearts? My prayer is that the Lord might have mercy and that by his Spirit there would be a burn in our hearts and in this church, a passion for Jesus, a passion to know him, a passion to love him, a passion that will always result in service. Just look down with me to verse 33 to 35. What happens after this burn? Verse 33, and they rose that same hour and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and those who were with them gathered together, saying, the Lord has risen indeed and has appeared to Simon. Then they told what had happened on the road and how he was known to them in the breaking of bread. It will always result in service and blessing of others. Let me pray. Father, thank you. Help us to have a heart that is burning for Jesus. Would our desire be for Jesus in life and to love him with everything. In Jesus' name, amen.